Welcome to the Flight Club Podcast, a woman's guide to leaning out. We give you a behind-the-scenes look at business launch and growth through the stories of successful female entrepreneurs. Here's your host, Felina Hansen, founder and CEO of Hera Hub.
Hello and welcome. I am excited to share my conversation today with Joan Brackin. Joan is a former corporate scientist and engineer who holds an MS in microbiology, a BS in engineering, and an MBA in finance. She is also a certified integrative medicine health coach. Her business, which is called Thrive After Corporate, I bet you can take a guess at what she does. She helps post-corporate employees regain and sustain their vibrant well-being. Joan uses the principle of integrating the physical, emotional, spiritual, and social pillars to bring back optimum health to her clients. Welcome to the show today, Joan.
Oh, thank you so much, Felina. It's so good to hear from you. I know during these unusual circumstances, we've not been able to have too much face-to-face right now.
Exactly. Hopefully we'll be back to that.
Oh, I hope so. I miss everybody.
I know, me too. Awesome. Well, let's dive in. Take us back. Tell us more about your background, your career path, all of that. Great stuff.
Sure, I'd be glad to. I started when I was 24 years old. I went to the University of Oklahoma and got a degree in microbiology. I've always just been fascinated with science. And I got recruited right out of graduate school to work at a company that I really didn't know much about, but they were doing something interesting called genetic engineering of plants. And being a young graduate student, that sounded like a really good opportunity. Turned out it was for a pretty controversial company called Monsanto, where I spent little over 17 years of my career, which is unusual these days, I think, for people to stay so long. It was rewarding. Towards the end, it got a little where it wasn't rewarding anymore, just because as I grew older and kind of realized who I was working for, and then just changes in the environment. And I realized that perhaps it was time for a change in my own career. So I left there in May of 1999. And at that time, being from Oklahoma, I thought, it might be nice to explore some other part of the country than the Midwest. And I decided just kind of on a whim to come to San Diego. I had a couple of people I knew here, and I didn't really have a job when I moved here. It was just on a whim. So I came out here. At the time, I had taken a year off of work to finish a degree. I was working in a biotechnology field, and I decided I needed an engineering background because really what was appealing to me after all those years in corporate life was to do something very near and dear to my heart, and that was environmental restoration. Being an environmental enthusiast, and I'm a scuba diver, and I thought, it would really be nice to go and help clean up the environment and protect it. So I came out to San Diego where there would be, lots of opportunities for that field. So after I finished my second degree, which was a Bachelor's of Science in Civil Engineering, even though it was in civil engineering, I always did environmental work. I came out to San Diego and spent almost 11 years with various consulting companies, engineering consulting companies. Actually did a brief stint with the EPA, only for about 8 months because regulations just was not exciting to me. But it was a good learning experience, but it just wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to create technology. I wanted to actually get out there and do something. So that's what I did for another 11 years, was environmental restoration and pollution plans, and actually doing remediation where you go in and get the junk chemicals and the stuff out of groundwater and out of the soil to restore a piece of property. And that was pretty rewarding. I did that up to 2012. And at that time, I was about 28 years into my career. And I think we get close to our expiration date when we've been that long. And I had certainly hit mine. So I just decided, being a baby boomer, there comes a time when you need to take care of your aging family and those kind of considerations coming up. So I decided just to take a break and do the things that daughters do for their family and take care of an aging mom and figure out what was next in my life. And I didn't really know Felina because all I'd known was science and engineering for 28 years, including, another few years of graduate school. So I knew that I wasn't going to go back when I hired 3 different people to do my resume, and I still couldn't get done. So finally, a business coach friend of mine says, I don't think you're going to go back. I can't get you to do one thing that I'm asking you to do. So let's do a flip. And, we're a pivot, as we call it in entrepreneurship. And let's decide something that you might really be passionate about. And at that time, a friend of mine who's a nurse practitioner was getting into something I knew nothing about, which was integrative medicine. And I was one of her guinea pigs, I shall say, when she was doing her practicum, learning how to do all the different principles of integrative medicine. And I got fascinated because I learned so much about why I wasn't feeling good after 28 years of corporate life and why Western medicine really wasn't addressing the situations. And when I started working with her and we started actually restoring my health, I realized this is a fantastic career. So I asked her, I'm a scientist. I'm not a nurse. I'm not a doctor. Can I do this? And she said, yeah, you can go to like a health coaching program and they'll train you and you can get certified. And it opened the world up to me, Felina, that I had no idea about. So I went back one more time for one more degree. I'd already finished an MBA. And the reason I wanted to do that is that I wanted to become an independent business owner. And quite honestly, engineers and scientists do not do well trying to run their own business. They don't understand finance. And so usually they can't run a profitable business. And I thought, well, I enjoy mentoring people. I enjoy our entrepreneurship program we have at Hera Hub. And since I've got some downtime, I wasn't working since I was taking care of aged parents, I thought, you know what, I'll do that thing I've always thought I should do and go get skilled on the business side. So I went and got an MBA in finance. I loved it. It's serving me well. And then after that, I found a doctor up in Seattle, wonderful woman, who had one of the few in the nation, an actual certification program for health coaches. So I spent a year taking her program, developing a business, and that's where Thrive After Corporate came from my own story of recognizing the toll that 28 years of career had taken on me, with fatigue and thyroid dysfunctions and upset stomach. And I'm like, this can't be right. Surely there's a better way to live life than this. But when I got into integrative medicine, and then with the help of my friend who steered me in that direction, I realized that we didn't have to be that. We could restore our health. I realized that people are under so much stress in corporate life, it's unfortunately just there we go. It's just normal that they come out with a lot of health problems. So that's where Thrive After Corporate came from, is to help people when they get out of their corporate career, not be like me and hundreds of my friends who thought it was just normal not to be able to get off the couch. And that's not normal. It's just that our body is so fatigued. And I didn't want people to spend their post-corporate years not being able to do their dreams, all the things that they dreamed about while they're sitting in their cubicle of, seeing their kids and grandkids more, or learning how to fly fish, or finally getting to do that European cruise, but not feeling able to do it. So using myself as an example and my peer group, I recognized that was a really good niche area to go into with my business, is to help corporate people restore their health so they could actually enjoy their post-corporate years. And that's where it all came from. So to me, it kind of comes full circle for working with a company for a very long time called Monsanto that maybe didn't do all the great things for the world. It's still controversial whether genetically engineered crops are a good thing for us. So I felt like it kind of came full circle that now where I started working from in a major corporation like that I can now actually go through and help people regain their health. So it seemed to me that my career just kind of came full circle over the last few years. So that's what I do now. I have it's all pretty much virtual. I do work with clients one-on-one. Of course, these days we're all working. But that's where Thrive After Corporate came from.
I love it. I love it. So I want to go back here a little bit and talk about this full circle piece, Joan, because it really is interesting. I mean, you couldn't have designed a more interesting path if you ask me, because, well, number one, I also want to say you have an amazing amount of education. I mean, you're like, I wanted to learn finance. So I went and got my MBA. Like, you have a master's degree, a bachelor's degree, another master's degree. If you add it all up, it's pretty much a PhD. We'll just go with that. So,
but and it served me well. I used each of those degrees for what they were for. So my microbiology degree, I used that when I was at Monsanto. When I realized I wanted to do environmental restoration, I needed to be an engineer. So each of those degrees had a purpose. It wasn't just to sit and get another degree. They all had purpose for my career.
Yeah, absolutely. So just again, going back to, because yes, Monsanto, I would just,
Monsanto.
I want to put a nice, flair on it, right?
Yes.
So Monsanto, to your point, I mean, there's been a lot of controversy around the company. There's been movies made about, what they've done and their impact on the environment. I mean, so I do think it's interesting and fitting that you then kind of, from what I can see in the storyline here, you went to the other side, so to speak, to help clean up, arguably a lot of what those types of companies have done to our environment. And then,
exactly.
Yeah. And then you're, as you say, coming full circle with helping clean up our own bodies. Obviously we need both cleaning up of the environment so we don't continue to put these toxic chemicals into our bodies.
So right.
Oh my gosh. I was just listening to an account, good Lord, what state was it in? Somewhere on the East Coast where, again, one of these big pharmaceutical companies was, pumping some, forever chemical, as they call it, into the wastewater.
Yes.
Right?
That Blackwater video that came out was just fascinating and probably mostly true, because that's what those top industrial companies did back in the day when, a combination of lack of regulations as well as doing things because they could get away with it.
In this particular case, and you're obviously much more educated in this whole world than I am. I just heard the account of it. They were measuring the plastic levels in people's bodies in that particular area, and it was just off the charts. I mean, I can't even imagine.
Well, and you could look at Aaron Brockovich, and of course that was highly, made for movies, but the foundation of what happened is true. Same with Blackwater, or same with the chemical known as glyphosate, which a lot of people know is Roundup. And I think people are familiar with all the lawsuits. And now, at least in my field, we can routinely measure levels of glyphosate in people's body to see whether they've been exposed.
Gosh. Interesting. All right. So let's go on. Are you willing to talk a little bit about a business that you had for 6 years called Someday Is Now? Talk about the just the
I'd love to.
The impetus for that and what.
Yeah, that's been fun. Someday Is Now actually started way back in 2014 when I first met my marketing strategist at a really wonderful little digital company up in Long Beach called Art of Online Marketing. And it started kind of as a whim. I was actually sitting with someone who was helping to teach me. Since I was a scientist and engineer, I didn't know anything about how to do internet marketing. And she was teaching me. And for some reason that expression came up, and being always looking for an opportunity, I said, "What did you just say?" And she's like, "Someday is now, Joan, for you to learn this." And I went, let's see if anybody's trademarked that. So sure enough, I got on TEST, which is the trademarking system for the patent office. And I was just stunned that nobody had trademarked Someday Is Now for the use of, say, PR, marketing, campaigning. So that Saturday, I called one of our Hera Hub members, who's a trademark attorney, and filed 3 trademarks for it under 3 different categories. And then I called my marketing strategist, who was totally enamored with it. So we picked through some ideas, and initially it just started as providing inspiration and resource to people so that they wouldn't, how I express it, Felina, so they wouldn't be singing the requiem of their dreams when they're 80 or 85 and, fill in the blank, I wish I had done, fill in the blank. And that we wanted to encourage people to do that. So that's how it started. And then I kind of let it slide for a few years, but interesting enough, I believe it was 2 years ago, I got a call from Cliff Bar. We usually have those Cliff Bars in our Hera Hub offices. So we know the brand with all their products. And they were wanting to do a campaign at the Women's World Soccer meet 2 years ago. I believe it was in France. And it was called Someday Is Now for Women's Pay Equality. And I'm like, well, that's a fantastic idea, but what do you want from me? And they go, oh, we're just letting you know we're going to do that. And I'm like, well, did you do your due diligence? You can't without my permission. I own all the trademarks. And I think, how they resource out to advertising companies had not done their due diligence. And as it turned out, they ended up licensing my trademarks so that they could do a Someday Is Now for Women's Equality. And it turned out really nice. And it gave some nice boost to my company, as well as having a licensing agreement. And then more recently, I turned it into a foundation. In fact, I just completed all the paperwork and the tax filings. So now Someday Is Now as a foundation, so that it's a registered 501c3, so that I can network, fundraise, and build up a financial background to be able to provide grants to people. And it could be grants to help women entrepreneurs. There's just a number of categories. We're still fleshing that part out because we just finished it, but it's a registered 501c3 now. I'm very excited about it. We've been so busy with Thrive After Corporate, and I'm just joined another business in LA that I haven't had time to do the fundraising I want to do, and this is not exactly the right time to do it, but eventually we'll get there. We'll spin back around and get it running as a full-fledged corporation, but we are on GuideStar. It is registered and is on GuideStar.
Great. So Someday Is Now is a foundation. It's a nonprofit, so a vehicle for doing some of the things that you'll be doing here in the future. Let's get back to Thrive After Corporate. Talk to us more about how you work with clients. I know you're doing a lot of work virtually right now, but maybe take me through, pretend I'm a potential client, and take me through the process where you're working with me and helping me find the solutions for my own body.
Sure. Yeah, I'd be glad to. That's a great question, Felina. And normally, to be honest, when people come to me as a client, is that they haven't been able to get resolution of their health issues through normal Western medicine. And it's just not in the model of normal Western medicine to do the things that we do in integrative medicine. So, for instance, the usual symptoms a post-corporate employee would be lots of gut problems, and they're tired, and they've got brain fog, and they wake up and they just feel sluggish, and they just want to sleep all the time. That's pretty much all the typical responses I get from somebody. So what we do is that we look at the root cause to say, okay, well, why do you have a stomachache all the time? And why are you feeling tired all the time? And why do you have brain fog? We look at the root cause. And to get at the root cause usually requires a little bit of testing. We do things like organic acid analysis, urinalysis. We do gut microbiome. We can test the adrenal functions. There's other blood markers that we can look at. But basically, it's solving the puzzle, right? So solving the puzzle usually requires data. And, it depends on their income. We can work with that. I know most of my health practitioners in my group, we do sliding scale to be able to work with more people. But the initial, really, I'll spend up to an hour or so, sometimes 2 hours, just doing an initial intake, because I really want to find out what's going on with somebody, and not just physically. I want to know their emotional status. I want to know what's going on at home, if they want to share that. I want to know if they have a spiritual practicing. Are they exercising? Do they do meditation? I want to really get a thorough idea of what is going on with this client and why they're feeling the way they are, because 50% of the time their complaints are emotional, not just physical. And so we need to use that as a root cause. And then we'll do some testing. I have a variety of labs I use, independent labs, depending on what they need. We get that data because there's power in data. We go through it together, and we'll set up, and it's very specific to each person. We'll set up a plan of care and a protocol to address each of those issues. I don't like to do too much at once. So if somebody's got a compendium of issues, we'll just say, okay, give me your top three. Let's work for those three first. And practically always we work with gut issues. Gut issues are the key to optimum health, and they're usually the number one place to start. So it can take as little as a few months, or it could take a year. It just depends on the severity of the issues and how many of those they have. but we work together ongoingly. I'm always available through text and email. I always tell them just check in with me every month if we're on every week if we're on a plan of care, particularly if they're doing like a treatment protocol. Maybe they have a yeast infection, maybe they have gut dysbiosis, which means bad bacteria in their gut. Then the protocol sometimes can make them feel worse before they feel better. And I always want them to check in, send me a text, feel free to call if something's not feeling right. So we work very closely together with our clients.
Do you integrate with other practitioners that provide, ancillary support services?
Absolutely, Felina. And I never fly without a net, is how I call it. I'm not a licensed practitioner. Most health coaches are not licensed. And so I work in conjunction. Hopefully, the best scenario is that a client and their primary care physician will work with me. And that means that testing can be ordered through their PCP, and that saves cost. And I also work with other specialists. For instance, I have several companies here in San Diego, whether if I'm doing genetics, then I have a consult with a doctor that I work on that. If I'm doing hormones and adrenal, I have somebody that I consult. So I don't, as I call it, fly without a net. I'm always working in consult with somebody. And if it's complexing, I have a network of practitioners through email that I can send out and go, I cannot figure this out with this client. Can you guys help? And they're amazing. They're just steeped with knowledge, and many of them are licensed practitioners. So I absolutely always work with other people when I'm addressing client complaints.
Yeah, it takes a village.
It does. People are complex, and everybody is special, and everybody comes with just their nuances. And they can be a head scratcher sometime, and I'm very fortunate that I have other people I can rely on to make sure that I'm being the best I can for my clients.
Absolutely. Well, Joan, tell us what is on the horizon for your business. What are you looking forward to post-COVID, we'll say?
Well, Felina, I'm anxious to kind of get back out there, so to speak. To be real honest, I stood down for a few months because I had no idea, just like everybody else, what is this bugger that's got everybody? The symptoms were so complex with COVID, and it took months to finally figure out that it's actually a massive inflammation disease. They thought that it was a respiratory disease. It's actually an inflammation disease. Yeah. So I was a little concerned, not being licensed, to get too far out of my comfort zone since we didn't know what the symptoms were. And I was afraid that I would get symptoms confused with something that could be as normal as just somebody eating the wrong foods, if that makes sense. So I stood down for a little bit, just worked with a few private clients that I knew until I could get, recently now we kind of know most. It's changing every day with COVID symptoms, but at least we know, let's say 90% of what are the symptoms of somebody who might have COVID. So I feel a little more comfortable in practicing now. So I'm just going to expand my business. And I can tell you one thing that's new with Thrive is I just signed on as a consultant with a wonderful company that's being built out of LA, and it's called the Science of Wellness. So I'll be one of their science advisors and health coaches. And what that company is about is we realize it's really confusing if somebody wants to buy a particular supplement, or it's really confusing to people when they need information that's actually fact-checked and based on science and based on well-thought-out science. And so we're developing a virtual company where they can go and get supplements that have been pre-screened for their purity, for their authenticity, for their rankings, that here's what most doctors use if you want to get a curcumin supplement or if you want to write form of D3. So in other words, we're taking the guesswork out of it for people, as well as be able to provide articles for them. I'm hoping in 2021 we're actually going to append a health coaching practice to the business. We're just rolling out right now, so of course everything's in development. But I'm very excited to work with them. So I just started that, and we'll be expanding my practice hopefully this year now that we're kind of getting a handle of what's going on here in the United States.
Yeah, that's, what's interesting to me, Joan, is, rightfully so, all the dialogue, the discussion is on finding a vaccine, of course, but I have seen less dialogue about, hey, let's get healthy as a country. Let's not have these, let's get us to a place where people don't have multiple comorbidities.
You're so on.
Right? I mean,
55%, and this is what appalls people. The whole vaccine, there's pros and cons. I'm actually assembling a group of good health professionals that I trust so we can do a summit on that. It's a little too soon yet because they haven't rolled out vaccines, but I want to make sure that people can Q&A. So we'll eventually do a summit on that where people can ask questions. But prior to that, you're very spot on. There's only a third of the country right now surveyed that says they'll get vaccinated. And I'm like, okay, we definitely have a problem here. I understand if you don't want to get vaccinated, it's very unknown and it's scary. But at the same time, you're not willing to wear a mask. At the same time, you're not willing to have your lifestyle interrupted. And those can't coexist. They can't coexist with a virus that spreads so rapidly and can wreak such havoc on your body. So you're exactly precise in that where we're addressing that is how about we work on you being healthy? We know this is a major inflammatory disease. We know that half the population has at least one comorbidity, which puts them at higher risk. Let's do what we can to articulate to you a few supplements that have been researched heavily that will help support your body to being having a healthy immune system. Here's the things we can do to reduce your own internal inflammation in case you do get sick to have a milder reaction. And that's where most of the health community is going because the whole thing with vaccine is just unknown right now. We can't really address it until they roll something out.
I know it takes time, obviously, for people to get healthy, and that's not the pill, so to speak. But I do feel like that needs to be more, in the forefront of the dialogues that are happening. It's not take a pill. It's get yourself well. So when this happens again, whatever it is, we can fight it in a better way.
You're absolutely right. And particularly when you say again, we're going to keep having these kind of incidences and hopefully next time we'll be prepared. And the unfortunate glaring spotlight of this pandemic is the unhealthiness of our nation. And that's been going on a long time. Heart disease and diabetes, this is nothing new. And affecting people of color, affecting the more impoverished people, there's nothing new here. Unfortunately, the pandemic spotlighted where we need to really, really roll up our sleeves, all of us, whether you're MD, whether you're in Western medicine, whether you're on alternative, to help people get healthier. And people, I don't know what it's going to take for people to understand that they are so at risk for anything, early death, other viruses, not just COVID, if they're not willing to take their own life in their own arms and get healthier. And so certainly that's where the health community and the integrative community is going forward, is to keep working with people to have underlying good health.
Yeah, absolutely. So Joan, let's let our listeners know how they can reach out to you and get in touch with you if they want to learn more about your business.
Sure. I have a wonderful website called thriveaftercorporate.com. And it has a contact sheet. Just go and send me a message, and I usually get back to you the same day. So feel free to contact me through my website.
Perfect. Thanks so much for your time today, Joan. I really appreciate it.
Felina, it was great to talk to you. I hope I get to see you soon.
Indeed.
All right. Take care.
Thank you for joining this week's episode of Flight Club, sponsored by Hera Hub. We look forward to sharing more success stories with you soon.